What's going on, everybody? I'm Jay Ray. In this video, I'm going to be taking an old worn out 4x6 like this that I found on the side of the road and turning it into an outdoor swing. This is a project that can be done in many different ways. Pretty much anybody can do it as long as you've got a drill and a place to hang some rope from. So all you need is really a 2x12, and you can cut it down and make it into the width of the swing that you want. Drill a couple holes, run some rope through it, and hang it from either a tree or some rafters. You know, if you got a sturdy tree branch like an oak tree or something, you can hang it from there. I don't have a tree to hang this from. I'm going to be hanging it from some rafters on my back porch when I'm done. But for now, I've got this oak board that used to be a 4x6. I've ripped it down and made some boards that are about 1.25 inches thick. I've glued them together edgewise, and the next step that I'm going to do is run them through the planer so that I can make them an even thickness throughout and try to get a smooth top and bottom surface. Next thing I'm going to do is just square up the ends on the miter saw. I'm going to take this now that I've squared up the ends and run it across the router table. I've got a 1/2 inch round over bit that I'm using here. I want to just make sure that none of the edges can hurt anybody's legs. Don't want any square edges on here that can poke into the back of somebody's knees or their legs or anything that could hurt somebody. So we're going to round over these edges. I think that'll be the best solution. I'm going to do one more step on this before I get to everybody's favorite part, which is sanding. And I'm going to drill a couple holes on each end of the board. That way I can run a rope through one hole across the bottom of the board and back up through the other hole. Now I'm going to be using 1/2 inch rope in order to mount this swing. So for the 1/2 inch holes, I'm actually going to be going a little bit larger. I'm going to be going to a 5/8 inch hole so I can easily push the rope through. So I'm using my speed square, and I'm going to be marking these about 1.5 inches from each edge. I think that'll be a good distance for the ropes to be apart. 1.5 inches on both sides. And then I'm going to come in 1.5 inches as well from the edge here. Since my first mark was a little bit shy of the 1.5 inch mark here, I'm just using the edge of my square to draw a line straight across the intersect. That way I'll have my points that I can drill out. So let's go here, 1.5 inches. Same this way. Intersect my lines. Now I put a sacrificial board underneath where I'm going to be drilling at, and for that I'm just using a couple pieces of scrap plywood that I had laying around. So when I go through the back side of this board, hopefully it won't break out because the sacrificial board will keep that from happening. I think that turned out pretty well. The holes look like they came through pretty clean on both sides of the board. So now it's time to do everybody's favorite step, sand the board. Since this is going to be used as a swing, I want to make sure that nobody's going to get splinters from this board. So I've been trying to fill in the holes where the knots were, some cracks and things in this board, and I've just been using polyurethane. So the polyurethane may not be the best thing to use for filling holes because it does take quite a while for it to cure. I've been waiting a couple days for this to cure on these deeper holes that we had in here where there were some knots that went through the board, and one of them went all the way through, and actually on the back side. Let's see, it came out a little bit right here, but I'm still waiting, and whenever this is cure and these are all clear, then I'll move on to the next step, which will be sanding the board down and prepping it for a final coat of polyurethane over the entire board. So I got this board sanded. I used 80 grit, then 120, then 180, and then I went up to 320 grit. So next thing I'm going to do is coat it with this polyurethane over the entire board. I'm starting with what I'm going to use as the bottom side of this swing, and I'm going to put the poly on it. I'm using this one coat polyurethane, but even though it's called one coat, I'm probably still going to put 2 or 3 coats, because usually the first coat, once you put that on, the texture is kind of rough, so you want to make it to where you can get a smooth finish. In order to do that, you usually have to sand between coats, and I'll use the 320 grit sandpaper to lightly sand between coats. So I'm going to start with putting this one coat polyurethane. I'm just using a cheap brush to brush it onto the board. Here's a little tip that you may or may not know. If you take your brush that's still got the polyurethane on it, put it in a piece of aluminum foil and wrap it, it'll help to make the brush last longer, where you won't have to clean it out and you won't have to get a new brush. So this trick here has enabled me to keep these brushes sometimes up for a day or two before having to get a new brush. So just wrap it up like that, fold the end over, and squeeze it tight around the handle. That'll protect your brush and keep it to where you can reuse it in a couple hours and without having to get a new brush. So the board's dry now. I've put a couple coats of polyurethane on it, and I'm going to use this side as the top. So the next step I'm going to do is take the rope, run it through one hole, and I'm going to pull it through the other side and push it up through that hole. Yep. So I'm going to pull a little bit more rope through. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a piece of tape around this right here to hold these together. The next step that I'm going to do is braid this rope into this other rope. You can do this with a stranded rope. And the rule of thumb is you want to braid the rope through as many times as what you have on strands. So if you got a 3-strand rope, you want to braid it through at least 3 times to get the maximum strength out of this joint. we got the ropes through here on both sides. We got the ropes braided into each other here. Should make a real strong joint. And then all we got to do now is find a spot and go hang it up. What's going on, everybody? In this video I'm going to be making a swing out of this piece of oak that I've got here. So I don't want to cause any pain to anybody, so I'm going to round over these edges with a 1/2 inch round over bit. Round over bit. Now I need to go ahead and run these through the planer so that I can get them to the nice and smooth surface. Let me see if I can walk. So I want to have 5/8 inch holes in this board in order to run 1/2 inch. Let me see if I can talk.